Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I apologize for the noise. I didn't realize it was going to be that noisy in the park today, so hopefully the microphone blocks out enough of it that you guys can understand me. I had at least half a dozen people yesterday ask me a very similar question, and I guess I should go ahead and address this. People have pointed out that in my old channel, over the year that it was running, that I made certain statements about protein intake and saturated fat, and they want to know why I changed my stance. And I really didn't change my stance so much as I reworded what I said, and I cut through the bullshit and the niceties that I used in the past. Now, the first one was about the saturated fat, and people said, well, why are you saying saturated fat is bad now and you said before that it wasn't? No, I said in moderation before that it wasn't. I never said that you should be eating unlimited amounts of it and that 100 grams of saturated fat a day probably wouldn't hurt you. What I've done is, rather than take the extremist stance that those who promote low-carb dieting or who are funded by the beef industry and the dairy industry and things, who tell people that saturated fat's not bad at all and it's all bullshit, I'm not supporting their extremist stance. And even though I have chosen basically a vegan route, I'm also not supporting the vegan bullshit stance that all saturated fat and cholesterol is bad and you shouldn't have any in your diet. I've taken the same middle ground that most experts would agree with, and the majority of nutrition experts out there will tell you that saturated fat and dietary cholesterol should be moderated, that in moderation they're not harmful. We don't believe they're harmful. No real reason to think that they are, but in excess there's enough data to suggest that there's at least a strong correlation there between cardiovascular disease and other issues and excess on them. So it's a reasonable stance to tell people to moderate them. You don't need to prove causation when there's strong enough correlations to show that an excess of something may be dangerous for an intelligent person to step back and say, well, even though it's not 100% proven, I should probably moderate it out of basic fucking common sense. And so based upon the data and what the experts say, I've chosen a sane middle ground, and I'm telling people to follow things like the FDA's basic guidelines or the NHS here in the UK, their basic guidelines. Of men should probably keep their saturated fat intake under 30 grams and women under 20 grams as a general health guideline rule. Now, I've never told people not to eat any of it because I try not to mix my personal ethics with the scientific data and taking a sane, rational approach. Now, my personal ethics, I should be telling people not to eat any meat, not to eat any dairy, because to me, it is a horrible thing from an ethical standpoint, from an animal rights standpoint, and from an environmental standpoint that people eat this stuff. However, it would also be me lying, telling a lie for a greater good when the data isn't really there to support it, and I just don't believe in doing that. So, on to the protein intake. There, in the past, I said, people oftentimes miss that you don't need this much protein. I'm just recommending 1 gram per pound of lean body mass as a safeguard to make sure that you get enough. And I felt at the time that it wasn't doing any harm, and I'm not stepping on any toes, and I wasn't making big waves by doing that, because my channel was fairly small before they banned me and blocked all of my videos there. Bodybuilding.com were actually a big part of my initial traffic and getting myself to my first 1,000 subscribers. I didn't want to step on certain people's toes, but I also said that you don't need that much. So hopefully people had picked up on that. But I've realized in retrospect that in light of the way forums like them have done me, the way certain people involved in the supplement company have done me with everything from lawsuits to legal threats, other threats of lawsuits, to even supplement company owners and people forwarding me the conversations back and forth who have sent emails who talk shit about me personally, I'm just no longer willing to back up their bullshit for profit. Now, we could argue that it's fairly harmless to make those recommendations because it's true. It's not going to hurt your gains if you only need 100 grams to go to 200 grams or 300 grams of protein. If that's what you choose to do, that's your own business. It shouldn't negatively affect your gains because you're just converting most of it to carbs anyways. Now, you might not be getting quite as much muscle glycogen. If you're running too low of carbs to do that, it's going to hurt your performance. But outside of that, it's not really going to hurt your gains. It's not a big deal. However, financially, it is a big deal. I do have a large number of subscribers who are college students in the college range who maybe work part-time jobs and go to school, who are on a very tight budget. And a lot of these guys send me messages all the time of how can I get cheaper protein sources. I'm really struggling to hit my 200 grams that I think I need a day, and my budget doesn't allow for it, even with cheap whey proteins, when if they just dropped it down to the minimums that they need according to sports nutrition experts. These guys who are on super tight budgets could be saving themselves $100 a month. This little white lie is harmful to people who are on a tighter budget. It is a problem. And the reality is, while there are some people who do promote the higher intakes, a very large number of successful sports nutritionists and people who coach international champions in top sports and strength sports around the world, everything from Olympic lifting to the NFL to professional rugby, follow these lower recommendations, and their guys still become champions. They still become #1 in the world. And when you look at the number of dirt poor kids who in the US who went to university on scholarships and their family couldn't even afford meat, and these guys maybe got some of their protein from milk, but some of them were eating 100 grams of protein, maybe 150 if they got lucky, if their family could afford meat that day, who got full athletic scholarships and went D1 at university. Some of these guys are bench pressing 350 pounds, squatting 500 pounds, while eating 100 grams of protein as high school students. It didn't prevent them from gaining enough muscle and strength to get a full scholarship to university, and then some of them going pro later. So I had one guy who loved my video yesterday, and he posted on the fan page that he only got about 100 grams of protein a day and managed to go to D1 at university and weighed 265 pounds as a D1 level athlete eating 100 grams of protein a day. All right, that alarm going off is going to cut this video short. So in short, I am tired of an industry that has, in effect, shit on me personally. Well, I'm tired of promoting their lies and bullshit so that they can make extra money. So that's another reason why instead of saying, well, you just need less than that, this is just a fail-safe, I've changed my stance to saying, look, this is the minimum that you need. You can go ahead and consume more than that. I'm not saying you only have to hit this minimum, but I'm telling people that they have been misled regarding what they actually need as far as protein intakes to go to the NFL or to be a professional rugby player or to make it to the Olympics in a strength sport. And it's a hell of a lot lower than people think. All right, guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.